Hello, I'm talking to you from the floor today because I want to talk about pot size. It can be a little confusing on pot sizes and making sure you have the right pot for your vegetable that you want to plant into your garden. And so when you're measuring out the gallons of a pot, it's very different than liquid because it's a dry measure as opposed to a liquid measure. So a liquid measure of a gallon of water is 16 cups. A dry measure of a gallon of soil is 18.61 cups. I have little notes down here so I can give you the right information because I don't want to mislead you in any way. So that's a bit of a difference, right? So you need to think about that when you're buying the pot. The other thing that's very confusing out on the market is the trade gallons that the florist companies use. So they call a 1 gallon pot, you think it's a 1 gallon pot, but really it isn't. It's 0.66 to 0.75 gallons in that particular pot. The same with the 2 gallon pot. It really isn't a true 2 gallons. It's about 1.5 to 1.75 gallons. And the same with a 3 gallon pot, it's about 2.5 to 3 gallons in the pot. So it's really interesting that you really want to understand how much soil is really in here so I know what plant it can support. Then there's like generalized rule of thumbs that people go by. So they'll say, well, an 8-inch pot is about a gallon. Then for every 2 inches that pot goes up, you add 2 gallons. So then a 10-inch pot would be 3 gallons, a 12-inch 5 gallons, and then a 14-inch 7 gallons. So this is 14 inches. And so I wanted to test, is this really going to hold 7 gallons? So there's a formula that you can use. So you measure the circumference of your pot. Now this one's pretty much straight up and down. There's not too much variation. It doesn't get real narrow at the bottom like some other pots do. And if that's the case, you have something like this, you probably want to measure the circumference around in the middle of the pot to get, an accurate measure of what's in it. But you measure the circumference, and I'm going to get a little mathy on you today, but not too bad. So you can still figure this out. So this circumference is 43 inches. I took a string, then I put the string on a measuring tape to find out what it was. It was 43 inches. Now, 14 inches in straight across, but then the circumference is 43 inches. So there's a very simple formula to use to figure it out. Now, the other number you need to know is how deep is this pot? Now, you can see it has a self-watering. I did not measure down to the bottom here. I measured to here, right? Just to here. So from here to here is 10 inches. That way, this is where water would fall and things like that. So I didn't really consider that a useful space. So this is 10 inches. So what we do is we take pi, 3.1417, and then we divide this circumference of 43 inches in half to get 21.5. So it's 3.1417 times 21.5 times the 10 inches gives us a number of 675.46. And then we divide that by 231 to get the number of gallons. And this works out to be 2.92 gallons. So if I went by that reference, that 14 inches is 7 gallons, and now I've really measured it out, and this is about 3 gallons, that's a big difference on what kind of plant I can put in here. Because if I thought this was 7 gallons, maybe I'd want to put an emerald bell pepper in here, and it's going to be too small. It'll be adequate for smaller pepper varieties, such as habanero, jalapeno, things like that, but it's not going to be adequate for larger pepper sizes. So that's why it's really important to understand what my container is and how much soil it's going to hold. So now, you do the same thing for a square pot, except it's a little easier, right? You don't have to measure this. You're basically measuring the length times the width times the depth, but then you're still dividing it by the 231 to get to how many gallons is really in the pot. So I don't want to like really show who the vendor is here, but so this is telling me that I have 12 dry quarts. So 12 dry quarts, if there's 4 quarts to a gallon, that should be 3 gallons of dirt to put into this pot. So I very carefully measured it out. And this is 1 gallon. This is 2 gallons. And then this was left. So I'm a little shy of the 3 gallons. So the research that I was doing was indicating that, well, it could be how much moisture is in the soil, or they're settling, or, you know, who knows what, blah, blah, blah. Because, you know, really, I would not expect this big of a difference. So just so you know, when I measured this pot using our formula, I went halfway down. This came out to be 1.2 gallons. That's what it holds, you know, right to the rim. So you can see I have 1 gallon. So it's about right. The formula works. So you can see it with your eyes that the formula really works. And that's really important and impressive. So get these back over here. So I just, you know, I wanted to share that because we're starting to plan now. Spring is right around the corner. And if you're a gardener like I'm a gardener, I'm not just planting in the ground. I have raised beds. I have green stalks. I have pots that I put out all over the place, you know, whether it be for flowers or vegetables or whatever it is. So I'm doing a lot of different things with the pots, especially like my tomatoes. I have my tomato grow bags with the trellises attached to it. So we're all doing the same thing, but we want to make sure, if we want to get the most abundance out of the plant that we're planting, that we know how much soil is in it, because most larger plants require a minimum of 5 gallons. Most of them do. Some even more. Like if you get into like melons and things like that, they need 10 to 15 gallons. So if I put a plant that needed a minimum of 5 gallons in this pot, it's not going to grow well. It's not going to produce well. It'll probably be smaller and produce less fruit. And then, of course, it's going to suck out all the nutrients quickly too, because the pot's just not the right size for it. So I thought that would be really important and really interesting information to share. And remember, circumference, divide that number in half, depth. So then take 3.1417 times 1/2 of the circumference times the depth divided by 231, and that will tell you how many gallons is in your pot. So I hope that was helpful, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye, friends.